They all laughed in the grand hall. The air was filled with music and mockery, and the lights of the alien city blinked like stars outside the giant glass dome. The Council of Zirene had made a strange decision, a strange cruel joke on a planet called Earth. Far below them, a human lived. His name was Kalin. He was no king, no warrior, no genius. Just a simple man with rough hands and quiet eyes, and that made him the perfect target for their trick. The Zirene thought humans were weak, slow, and boring. They thought humans were not fit to share the stars, so they made a plan. They would send one of their own as a bride, a fake bride. A joke bride to the human to laugh at him, and at his kind they picked a girl named Zirene, tall, strong, with skin like silver blue steel, and eyes sharp like blades. She had trained in combat, she had never smiled, and never loved. And she was the perfect tool for their game. Zirene did not care about the plan at first. She agreed because she was bored, and because she wanted to see Earth. She had heard humans smelled strange, and their homes were small, and their minds were soft. She was told to mock the human, to show no respect, to let the people of the stars laugh and cheer, as the human tried to win her heart, and failed. Kalin did not know why a ship landed in his backyard. One calm morning he was making tea. When the ground shook and the trees bent and the light flashed, he stepped outside and saw her standing there, tall and glowing with armor shining like moonlight. She said one thing, "I am your bride," and he blinked once and said, "Welcome." There were no guards, no cameras, no one watching, just her and him, and silence. In the soft wind she followed him inside, expecting to see fear, or pride, or maybe foolish joy, but he only asked if she was hungry, and handed her a blanket. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Days passed, then weeks. She slept in his guest room, and watched him fix old machines, and feed animals, and make strange jokes. He never asked for anything, never touched her, never stared too long. He let her be and talked to her like a friend, not like a gift or a joke. Zirene did not know how to feel. She was trained to fight, not to sit still. She wanted to leave, but also wanted to stay. The human made strange meals, but they tasted warm. He fixed a broken chair and gave it to her with a smile. He said, "This one is yours," and she did not know why that made her chest feel tight. One night it rained, and the roof leaked. She helped him patch it, and their hands touched for 1 second. She pulled away, but her fingers tingled. She went outside in the rain to clear her head, but found herself staring at the stars, wondering what they were thinking up there. Were they still laughing? Had they forgotten her? Did they care? She looked back at the house. The lights were soft and warm, and inside the human waited, not with chains, not with rules, just with quiet and kindness. She walked back slowly, her heart heavy, her eyes wide. She asked him, "Do you think I am a joke?" And he looked at her with no fear and said, "I think you are tired." She did not know why she cried that night, or why she let him sit beside her, or why his silence felt louder than the voices in her head, but she stayed close to him, and for the first time in her life she did not feel alone. The days grew colder, the leaves turned gold. She started to help him with his work. She learned the names of birds and how to fix broken wires, and how to plant seeds. They laughed once at a squirrel that stole food, and she caught herself smiling, and quickly turned away. He gave her a small flower one morning, and her hand shook. When she took it, she did not crush it like she had planned. Instead, she kept it near her bed, and looked at it before sleep. Something strange was growing, something she could not name. Something soft and warm and dangerous. She was not afraid of death or pain, but she was afraid of this. The joke had begun to turn, the game was changing, and the girl who had come to mock the human was starting to see him not as prey, not as weak, but as something else, something she had never known. And far above in the stars, the council still laughed, thinking the joke was alive, thinking the human was still dancing like a fool, but they had no idea what was really happening down there. They had no idea what was coming next. The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet hills around Kalin's home. Birds sang in soft voices, the air smelled of dew and earth and peace, but inside, Zirene sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. They were hands trained to fight, to grip weapons, to crush bones. Yet last night, they had only held a flower. She had not thrown it away, and that scared her more than any battle. She walked out into the light, where Kalin was already working again, fixing a broken fence. A small creature had chewed through. He did not look up. When she stepped closer, only nodded, and said good morning, with that same calm voice he always used, not cold, not distant, just simple and steady like water flowing over stone. She watched him work for a while, saying nothing. Her people had trained her to study every movement of a target, but this time, she was not looking for weakness. She was trying to understand why he never shouted, never tried to control her, never acted like the others back home. The ones who laughed at humans, and called them pets. Zirene grabbed a tool from the ground and knelt beside him. He looked at her, surprised, but smiled and moved aside. She helped him repair the fence, and neither of them spoke much, only shared looks and nods, and short words that held no demands. Just quiet truth. Later they sat near the fire pit while the sun dipped low and stars began to show. Kalin handed her a metal cup with warm drink inside. She took it without thinking and sipped slowly. It tasted strange, but not bad. He spoke of things she had never heard of, like music made with strings and children who ran through fields, chasing flying discs, and food made from fire and smoke and sweet sugar. She listened in silence, wondering how a world so simple could still feel so rich, how a man so alone could carry so much warmth without asking for anything in return. Her chest ached, and she did not know why. In her world, strength was shown by power, by breaking others and rising above them, but this human showed strength by helping, by building, by healing, and by never forcing anyone to bow. His strength was quiet but deep, like roots hidden under the soil. The next day she woke early and followed him to the river where he caught fish. Using old tricks and handmade tools, she laughed once when he slipped and got soaked, and he only laughed with her, shaking his head and offering her the bigger fish later. He cooked them and offered her the first piece, without pride, without fear. Just kindness. As the days passed, she began to do more with him, collecting fruit, repairing wires, planting seeds, and sometimes just sitting beside him in silence. At night she would stare at the stars and wonder how something so simple could feel so right. She had come here to be cruel, to make him beg to break his spirit and report back to the council with smug words, but every day he gave her nothing to fight against. No anger, no weakness, only calm eyes and steady hands. She had faced monsters with claws and fire, but this man was different. His silence was a wall, his kindness was armor, his presence was a storm that made her doubt everything she had been taught. One evening, as they sat watching the sun vanish behind the hills, she asked him why he treated her so well, even though he knew she had come to hurt him. He looked at her for a long moment and said, "Because I know pain, and I do not want to give more of it to others." His words were soft, but they hit her like a strike. She turned her head so he would not see the way. Her eyes glistened with something she could not name, something that burned and healed. At the same time, she wanted to argue, to say something sharp, but her throat felt tight, and her heart was louder than her thoughts. She remembered how her own father never smiled, how her teachers only praised power, how her people called love a weakness. And now here was a man with nothing to prove, and no reason to forgive her. Yet he welcomed her with open hands, and eyes that saw more than her armor. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers brushed the flower he gave her, still fresh in a small cup beside her bed. She held it close, and whispered words, in her language, words no one had ever heard from her lips before. Not even her own reflection, in the mirror outside. The wind moved through the trees, and the stars blinked above like watchers of a story not yet finished. And far away in the cold halls of the Zirene Council, they still smiled, thinking the joke was working, thinking the human was being fooled. But the truth was clear. In the silence between them, something had changed, not with fire or battle or orders, but with care. And the human they mocked was becoming something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. He was becoming loved. Villani stood at the window, watching the trees dance in the wind, her arms crossed, her breath slow, her eyes following the clouds that moved like waves across the sky. She had never spent so long in one place, never felt so still, and yet inside her chest something moved, something wild and soft and confusing. Behind her, Kalin hummed as he fixed a broken light, his tools clicking gently, his voice low and steady. She had learned his songs were old songs from Earth, songs people used to sing while walking or cooking or dreaming. She did not understand the words, but the sound made her feel warm, like a blanket placed over cold shoulders. Each day she found herself waking earlier, not from duty, but from the need to see what he would do next. Sometimes he would sit outside just watching the sunrise, with a cup in his hand, and she would sit near him, pretending to look at the sky, but really watching the way the light touched his face. The wind brought scents she had never smelled before. Smoke from fire, bark from trees, herbs from the garden they had planted together. She touched the leaves with gentle fingers, remembering how he had taught her to press the seeds into the soil, not too deep, not too shallow, just enough to let them breathe. She remembered his hands, guiding hers, not holding, just showing, letting her feel her own way. And when the first sprout broke the ground, she had smiled, not with her lips, but with her whole being. He had looked at her and nodded, like they shared a secret, and maybe they did. One morning, he handed her a cloth and pointed to a wooden frame. He asked her to help him paint it. She did not know how, but he showed her again. No force, just steps, and time, and patience. Her fingers slipped, and color streaked across her cheek, and he laughed, and she laughed too. The sound surprised her, and she turned away, her face burning. That night she could not sleep. She lay under the stars, and thought about his laugh, about the way it made her stomach flutter. She had heard many sounds in her life, the screams of battle, The roars of beasts, the commands of leaders, but nothing had ever shaken her. Like the soft joy in that laugh, she began to dream. Strange dreams, not of war or victory, but of long walks with him through endless forests, of holding hands, without speaking, of lying beside him under the stars, while the world turned slow and safe around them. And in those dreams, her armor was gone and her heart was bare. Each day the silence between them grew louder, not with tension but with meaning. She found herself bringing him water before he asked, fixing small things around the home just to see his smile, and when he touched her shoulder in thanks, her skin burned like fire, and she did not pull away. One afternoon, he showed her how to make a wooden carving. She chose the shape of a bird, one she had seen flying near the stream. It took many tries, but she did not give up. He praised her effort, not the result, and that praise made her chest ache in a strange good way. She began to notice things about him, the small scar near his ear, the way his hands always moved with purpose, the way his voice changed when he talked about stars and dreams and stories he would never live. And something inside her cracked like ice under heat. She tried to remind herself of the plan, of the joke of the council, watching from afar, but every time she looked at Kalin, she saw no joke, only a man who had given her more than she had ever known, a man who asked for nothing and gave everything. She watched him build a chair for her. From wood he gathered himself every cut, careful, every corner smooth. And when he gave it to her, she could not speak. She just sat down slowly and held her breath as he smiled and walked away, whistling that same soft tune. Her heart beat like a drum in her chest, and she pressed her hand to it, as if to quiet the sound, but it only grew louder. And in that moment she understood something terrible and beautiful. She was not here to trick him anymore. She was not here to mock or control. She was here because she wanted to be, because this place felt more like home than anywhere she had ever known. And the feeling that rose in her, every time he looked at her, every time he spoke her name, every time he smiled, that feeling had a name she had never dared to say, but now it echoed in her thoughts like a song. And far away, the stars watched, as the joke bride of the galaxy sat in silence, holding a wooden bird, and dreaming of a future that no one had planned, but her heart had already chosen. The air was heavy that night, the sky thick with clouds that covered the stars, and the wind whispered through the trees like it carried secrets. Villani sat near the fire, her hands close to the flame, her eyes lost in the soft dance of the light behind her. The house stood quiet, but she did not feel like going inside, not yet. She had spent the day walking the edge of the woods, her thoughts spinning like leaves in the wind. She remembered every moment, every look, every word Kalin had spoken since her arrival, and none of it made sense. None of it fit with the picture of humans she had been taught to believe. He was not weak, he was not foolish. He was not afraid. She looked down at her hands, strong hands, scarred hands, hands made to break things, to fight battles, but now they felt empty. Without purpose, unless they were helping him, unless they were close to him, and that thought made her chest tighten in a way that scared her more than any weapon. Footsteps approached, soft, steady. Not rushed, not loud, just calm and familiar. She turned her head and saw Kalin walking toward her, holding a blanket and 2 cups of something warm. He handed one to her without a word, and sat beside her. Both of them watched the fire for a long time, saying nothing, letting the silence speak for them. After a while, he spoke, not about love, not about dreams, but about his mother who had died when he was young, and about the tree he planted for her, and about the nights he used to sit alone, just like this, hoping someone would find him and sit beside him the way she was now. She listened without speaking, her eyes on the fire, her heart beating faster with every word he shared. She had seen many brave warriors fall and scream, but this man spoke of pain without shame, without anger, just truth, and the truth touched something deep inside her, something she had kept locked away. The wind picked up, and she shivered, he noticed, and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. His fingers brushed her neck, and she froze, not from fear, but from the warmth that shot through her like lightning. He leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the fire warm his face, and she stared at him, not as a soldier, not as an enemy, not even as a man, but as something she could not name. She moved closer without thinking, drawn by something she did not understand. Her shoulder touched his, and he opened his eyes. Slowly, their eyes met, and held for what felt like forever, and in that moment, everything else vanished. The stars, the war, the council, the reason she had come here. Her hand lifted to touch his face, soft and slow, and he did not pull away. He placed his hand over hers, and leaned into it gently, like he had been waiting for this, like he had known this would happen. She leaned in, and their lips met, and her mind went still. There was no fire, no storm, no great explosion, just silence and heat, and the soft truth of 2 broken souls finding each other in a world that never meant for them to meet. She pulled back first, eyes wide, heart pounding, breath shallow. He searched her face for regret or fear, but found none, only wonder, only need, only a question without words, and she answered by leaning in again. This time with both hands pressed to his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her like she was something precious. They did not speak, as they moved together, not with voices, but with touches, with soft sighs, with trembling hands that asked and answered without sound. That night her armor stayed on the floor, and her fears stayed in the dark, and in his arms. She found something she had never known, something that felt like peace. In the early light of morning she lay beside him, listening to his breath steady and calm, her fingers tracing the lines of his chest. Her thoughts no longer heavy, only clear. She rose slowly, and dressed in silence, watching him sleep, knowing that something inside her had changed forever. She stepped outside, and looked up at the sky. The clouds were gone, and the stars were fading, but their light still reached her. She knew she could not stay, not yet, not without answers, not without facing what waited back home. She had come here for a joke, but found something real, and now she carried that truth inside her. Without a word she walked away into the trees, back toward the place that sent her to laugh at a human, not knowing that she would return with more than stories. She would return with a secret that would shake the stars. And back in the small quiet house, the human slept with a smile on his face, not knowing that love had touched him, and left a part of itself behind. The great ships floated above the capital like shadows from old legends, their lights blinking across the dark sky, as the people below gathered in silence. Whispers passing from one to another, questions rising like dust in a storm. The council chamber stood tall and cold, its silver walls glowing in the moonlight, and in the center stood Villani, her face calm, her eyes sharp, her belly round with new life. They had not expected her to return, they had not expected her to come back at all, and when they saw her step from the ship, with slow steps and a growing belly, their laughter died in their throats. What was meant to be a joke had become something real, something dangerous, something none of them had planned. Her father sat high on the throne, a man carved from stone, a voice that once shook armies, now trembling with quiet rage. He looked down at her, and asked one question. "Whose is it?" And she answered with no fear. The human and the room exploded with voices. Leaders shouted, warriors cursed. Scholars whispered in panic. One voice rose above the rest. "It is impossible. The genes would reject it. The blood cannot mix. It is unnatural. It is wrong." But Villani stood firm, her hand on her stomach, her voice clear. "It is not wrong. It is alive. And it is mine." They ordered tests, scans, meetings, secret sessions with old minds who feared change more than death. They studied her body. The child inside her, the heartbeat steady, the growth strong. The results were clear. The child was healthy, powerful, different, and none could deny it. Some called for exile, some called for silence. Some begged her to hide it, to end it, to forget what had happened, and start again. As if love could be erased, as if a soul could be undone. Villani refused. She did not shout, she did not cry, she simply stood and spoke the truth. "He showed me kindness, he gave me nothing but respect. He did not ask for this, he did not demand my body, he did not trick me. I chose him, I wanted him, and now I carried the proof of that choice." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Old warriors looked away, mothers covered their mouths. Young fighters stared in awe and fear, for they had never seen her like this, not as a soldier, not as a daughter, not as a tool, but as something more, as a bridge between two worlds. In the days that followed, rumors spread faster than light. Some said the child would grow wings. Others said it would tear the stars apart with one cry. Some said it was a gift from the gods. Others said it was a curse to end the line of warriors forever. Villani stayed in the high towers, guarded, not by chains, but by whispers. She walked the halls with her head held high, her hand always resting over the small life inside her. She did not speak of she did not cry for him, but every night she looked at the stars and wondered if he knew, if he missed her, if he dreamed of her as she dreamed of him. Her father visited once, standing at the door, his face unreadable, his voice low. "You brought shame," he said, and she replied, "No, I brought change, and change is what you fear." He turned away without another word, and she did not follow. She did not need his blessing. She already had something far greater, something that moved and kicked inside her, like a new sun ready to rise. The council could not decide what to do. The law had no rule for this, no code for love between enemies, no page for children born from peace. So they waited and watched and whispered behind closed doors, hoping the problem would fade, hoping the child would vanish like a bad dream. But Villani would not vanish, she would not fade. She grew stronger each day, her body preparing, her heart steady, her mind clear. She spoke to the child when no one listened, told stories of stars and seeds and humans with quiet smiles and hands that built not broke. And far away on a green world, under a soft sky, a man named Kalin stared at the same stars, holding a carving of a bird in his hand, wondering why the nights felt colder, Without her, why his chest ached every time he closed his eyes, why the flower on her windowsill had not yet died. He did not know what waited beyond the stars. He did not know she had left with more than memories. He did not know the council feared the child he had never touched, but soon he would know. Soon the stars would shift, and nothing would ever be the same again. The wind carried strange voices that night, voices from the stars that whispered of secrets and danger, and love. Kalin sat by the fire, his eyes lost in the glow, his hands holding a small carving shaped like a flower, the same flower she once placed beside her bed. He had not seen her for many moons, but her memory lived in every breath he took, in every step he walked, and in every beat of his quiet human heart. Then a message came, not through wires or screens, but through a visitor, a trader from the stars. His ship broken, his words careful, he spoke of a city in the sky, of a woman with silver blue skin, of a child growing in her body, and of fear in the hearts of the powerful. Kalin listened in silence, his breath slow, his hands still. The trader did not ask questions, he simply gave what he knew, and left with thanks and food, and warm clothes, and a heart heavy with what he had seen. Kalin stood and packed his tools. He did not ask for help, he did not say goodbye. He left a note for a friend, and walked into the woods where an old ship waited, one he had rebuilt from junk and memory and stubborn hope. He fixed the last wires, checked the power, and flew into the dark without fear, without maps, without pause. The stars stretched wide above him, like an ocean of cold light, but his fire burned hot in his chest. He did not know what would greet him, what walls would rise, what weapons would point, but none of it mattered. He knew only one truth: she needed him, and he would come. Across space he flew, past empty moons and silent rocks, past stations that blinked and watched, but did not stop him, past guards who saw an old ship and looked away, not seeing the storm inside. When he reached the edge of the city, the sky was full of light and ships and metal birds that scanned and searched. He landed far outside the gates and walked with steady steps, wearing no armor, holding no weapons, carrying only a satchel with a single gift inside, a blanket he once gave her, now folded clean and warm. The guards saw him and laughed at first, until he spoke her name, until he said, "I have come for Zirene," until they saw that his eyes held no fear, only love and fire and truth. They locked him in a small room, cold and gray, with no windows and no bed. He sat on the floor, closed his eyes and waited. He did not shout, he did not plead, he simply waited with the patience of the earth and the strength of a seed. The council met, and argued and raged. Some said to send him back, some said to keep him hidden. Some feared what would happen if the people saw him, and knew that the joke had become a story, that the story had become a flame. Zirene heard the whispers and pushed past the guards. Her belly full, her steps slow but strong, she burst into the chamber where they held him, and when she saw him she did not speak. She simply ran to him and fell into his arms, and the world around them vanished. The guards did not move, the council did not speak, the air itself held its breath as she held him, as he held her, as their hands touched. The life inside her moved for the first time in the light, and she smiled, and he wept, and the walls between them shattered like glass. She turned to the council and said, "He came without force, without demand, without an army. He came because he loves me, and because I love him, and this child is ours, not yours, not theirs, not the galaxy's, but ours." The council could not stop the truth. It spread through the towers, through the streets, through the stars. People spoke of the human who crossed the stars alone, who came without a sword, who stood in front of fire, and said, "I am not afraid." They brought him before the elders, the old ones, who had seen wars and peace and lies. They asked him what he wanted, and he said, only her, only the child, only the right to stay and grow and build a home with the one who gave him light. And though many still feared, though many still whispered, though many still watched in silence, they could not deny what they saw, what they felt, what the people had begun to believe: that something old had ended, and something new had begun, and at the center of it all stood a human and an alien, and a child waiting to be born under a sky that no longer belonged to one world, but two, to joined not by force, but by love, that crossed fire and fear and time without breaking, without fading, without end. The sun rose over the great city of Zirene, casting long golden light across the towers and domes. The air was still, and the crowds gathered in silence, faces turned to the central square, where history would speak, not with weapons, not with orders, but with new life born from something the stars had tried to destroy. And Zirene stood tall, her hands resting gently on her stomach, now empty. Her child, born strong and warm and full of light beside her, stood Kalin, his eyes fixed on the crowd, his heart steady, his hand wrapped around hers. They wore simple clothes, not royal robes, not armor, not symbols of power, only truth and calm, and love. Their child lay in a small cradle woven from roots and metal, a mix of earth and sky, just like The life inside it, people stepped forward one by one, eyes wide, voices quiet. Some brought gifts, some brought tears, some fell to one knee. Without knowing why, without being told, they simply felt something they could not name. The council watched from above, their faces unreadable, their plans undone, their pride broken by something they could never have predicted, a union made without permission, without approval, without fear. Vellani looked at them, her gaze strong, her voice soft. You tried to make me a weapon. You tried to make him a joke, but you only made us stronger. We are not here to beg. We are not here to rule. We are here to life. She lifted the child into the light. The crowd gasped. Some wept, some cheered, some simply stared as the baby opened its eyes, glowing with a strange and gentle gold, and smiled. That smile was not human, not Zirene. It was something more, something new, something whole. Kalin stepped forward and spoke only once. I am just a man. I have no throne, no fleet, no army. But I have a heart, and that heart chose her, and now I choose this life, not because it is easy, but because it is real. The people began to speak of a new path of peace, not built by treaties or threats, but by two hands, joined by choice. They called it the union, they called it the bridge, they called it the day the stars bent low to watch love rewrite the future. Old warriors bowed their heads. Young students wrote songs, children painted the moment on walls and glass, and the story spread across systems faster than fire, carried by voices hungry for hope back on Earth. The news reached every corner, the story of the man who made an alien bride laugh, who gave her a flower, who waited without anger, who walked through fire, who held her close, who stood without shaking and changed the stars forever. They built a home near the rivers of Zirene, a place of trees and sky and laughter, and each day Vellani tended the garden and taught the child to grow, and each night Kalin told stories of Earth, of birds and rain, and the sound of wind in the leaves. Sometimes ships landed, bringing guests from far away. Some came with questions, some with doubts, some with gifts, and all left changed, not because of speeches, not because of force, but because they saw something real, something pure, something they had forgotten in their rush for power. Councils slowly faded, their control slipping as the people found new voices, new dreams, new ways to live, and at the heart of it all stood a small home, a family, a child who held both worlds. In one hand, Vellani often stood by the river, her feet in the water, her eyes on the horizon, thinking of the girl who once came to Earth with armor and pride and fear, thinking of the man who welcomed her with nothing but kindness and open hands, and a place to rest. Kalin often carved small gifts, birds, stars, names of trees, and gave them to her without reason, just because he loved her, just because he remembered what it felt like to be alone, and now never wanted her to feel that again. The child grew fast, with laughter like bells, and eyes that saw too much, and hands that reached for both moonlight and fire. And the people whispered that this child would one day lead, not with war, not with fear, but with the soft power of being born from something true. And so the story ended, not with a crown, not with a sword, not with a throne, but with a laugh and a kiss and a cradle in a garden. Under two suns, where once there was only cold, now lived warmth. And where once there was only silence, now bloomed song. And those who once laughed now bowed, not from shame, not from duty, but from wonder, for they had seen what love could don't. They would never forget.